the one thing I would say don't do is don't carry on living a lie, because you will regret it. And it's so much better for everybody when it's out in the open and you can be the person that you want to be.
Hello and welcome to Chaps Out with me, Grant Philpott, the podcast where I talk to men about coming out later in life and get to have the conversations I wish I'd heard when I was looking for advice. Conversations we still don't hear often enough in the UK. This podcast is for anyone navigating their own personal coming out journey wherever you may be. And remember, you are not alone.
My guest today was born and brought up in Folkestone in Kent before moving to London, where he served in the Metropolitan Police force, before eventually moving back to his hometown Folkestone in 2000. He was married and has 2 children and 2 grandchildren, and retired a year ago after a working life of investigating crime and running fraud investigation teams across the private sector. So I'm delighted to welcome to the Chaps Out podcast, Dave Kenealy. Hi, Dave.
Hi, Grant. Thanks very much.
Did I get your surname right there?
You did. Perfect.
Brilliant. Well, thanks for coming on. Obviously, you're going to be talking to us a little bit about your whole coming out story. So let's just start with the age you were when you decided that you wanted to come out.
I think in terms of context, I knew that I liked guys for a long time. But obviously, like a lot of people, I grew up in an era when being gay wasn't really socially acceptable. And you did what you thought was the right thing. So you get married, you have children, etc. I had a really happy marriage. I'm not going to, I have no regrets around that. But as time went on and as I got older, I realised that actually that wasn't what I wanted in life. I wanted to actually be able to be me. And at 55, that opportunity, as it were, finally arose. So I finally came out at 55.
55, yeah. How many years you've been married at that stage?
At that stage, we'd probably been married 30 plus years. So it was a long time. And obviously a big decision to make, because I was really comfortable in my marriage in that respect, but it just wasn't the right thing for me.
And how did you sort of bring that up then when it came to it?
If I'm honest, I didn't bring it up. It was kind of forced on me. I guess I'd been pushing the boundaries a bit more and a bit more, almost in the hope that that would be discovered and it would be an easy way of saying, yes, I'm gay. And essentially that's what happened. My ex-wife found social media sites and found sites on apps that I'd been looking at. And she essentially asked the question, are you gay? Initially with a small bit of denial, well, maybe I'm bi, etc. But it very quickly was, no, you're right, I'm gay and you need to know.
Yeah, so that must have been quite difficult and obviously hard conversations to have, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, can't say it was the easiest time of my life. And I think for me, the hardest part, if I'm really truthful, was causing upset to other people. And she'd done nothing wrong at all. She'd been a good wife, a good mother. But I couldn't love her in the way that she wanted to be loved. And I guess after the initial kind of, you've lied to me, you've kind of led me into a life that isn't real, essentially, it very quickly turned to understanding and, right, what are we going to do about this? And I was really fortunate that, she was supportive to a point. She didn't want to know kind of the ins and outs of everything. But at the same time, staying together was never really going to be an option for either of us.
When you were really young, you kind of knew very early on that you were possibly bisexual. Is that what you thought?
If I'm truthful, I probably knew I was gay, even at teenage age. But I think I grew up in the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, and they were all times that if you were brave enough to be gay, it wasn't an easy life to lead. Socially, it wasn't very acceptable. Probably every family had the uncle that nobody spoke about because, it was Uncle Jim, and, nobody spoke about Uncle Jim because he wasn't married and didn't have children, etc. It wasn't acceptable in a school life. It wasn't acceptable in a workplace in those days. And certainly I came from a family background where my dad was a military man, but hindsight's a wonderful thing. And actually, I don't think, I wish that I had the opportunity to say to both parents that this is who I am, this is what I am. And with hindsight, I genuinely don't think it would have been an issue. But, as a teenager, you get things in your mind and you kind of want to conform. You've got a group of friends, you want to be like your friends, you don't want to be different. And that's kind of the way it was for me.
Yeah, so yeah, that was the thing for many of us, I guess, is just that whole fear and that society wasn't welcoming and ready for that.
No, not at all. I mean, certainly in the 60s and the 70s, society was completely anti-gay men. I think gay women were in a more fortunate position because it didn't seem to have quite the same stigma that being a gay man did. If you did anything, you were kind of leaving yourself open to being arrested, persecuted, and prosecuted. And I think that it just wasn't a time that was conducive. I mean, being gay was portrayed on television at the time as being very camp, very flamboyant, when the reality is most gay men aren't actually like that at all. Things started to ease, in my view, around the 80s, certainly after the AIDS crisis.
Yeah, so like when did you join the police then?
So I joined the police in 1980.
Right.
So that was at a time when, quite frankly, the police were quite anti-gay people. There, certainly some of the areas I served on, it was almost a sport to bait gay people. I worked in an area in and around Clapham Common, which was a very popular meeting place for gay men. And it was very common for both police officers to work in plain clothes on the common and almost, I wouldn't quite say entrap, but entice men to do things that perhaps they wouldn't have done. And of course, that led to them being arrested and prosecuted, etc. Subsequently, of course, most of those men have had any prosecutions overturned. It was a difficult time, definitely, to be gay in the police force, that's for sure. And in those days, it was a police force and not a police service, as they kind of want to portray now. I know a number of examples where gay officers had either been caught doing something with another man, or were simply ousted out of the force just because of the fact they were gay, and really for no other reason. There was nothing to say you couldn't be gay formally, but in those days, the police was run very much on militaristic lines. So there was a kind of very hierarchical situation within police stations. And again, it was very much you either fitted in or you left. And if you wanted to fit in and make it, your career progress, then that's what you had to do.
Yeah, I guess there weren't that many places to go, or I mean, places like gay spaces.
No, there weren't that you could. Certainly not as a police officer, because you always run the risk of the place being raided or the place, police being outside looking and dealing with people. But I think even if you weren't in the police, there were minimal places. I think I think the sort of gay scene, as it were, bars, etc., grew up in the 80s, but beyond the point that I joined the police. And again, certainly the AIDS crisis didn't help the cause. There was a lot of scaremongering, a lot of misunderstanding. It was very much seen as a gay disease, as it were, when in reality it wasn't just a gay disease, of course. So I think spaces were very limited, and of course, gay men took the opportunity to meet perhaps wherever they could. And cottaging, for want of a better way of putting it, was very popular in those days amongst gay men, because it was seen as a relatively safe way of meeting men. However, of course, it was actually illegal in that it's still effectively illegal. But again, the police had operations running in certain areas to try and discourage that. And again, men became victims of the judicial system because they were prosecuted and convicted of crimes that simply don't exist nowadays.
So you obviously didn't. You were married, and you weren't going through that. You were just seeing it from your sort of job point of view, but you were, I guess, you're aware of colleagues and that, or did
Of
they manage to
course.
keep it under the? Did they, was there any sort of like knowing looks or anything like that?
So when I first joined the police, single man, I lived in what was then called a section house, and section houses were basically for single police officers. You had a room, there was a cafe, restaurant type thing. So there was a lot of young police officers, and there were a number of police officers, I would say, whilst it was never spoken about, I would pretty much back my pension that they were gay at the time. You'd often go out as groups, you'd gravitate to places like Soho, etc. And some of the bars that you'd go in, it wouldn't perhaps be where you would expect your straight friends to go. So, if you're comfortable in that environment, it would certainly give an indication that perhaps you were gay.
Yeah, yeah. Well, coming sort of up to when you did come out then to all your sort of family and that. So how did that all go down when it came to, you know, being open and honest to people you cared about?
It was difficult, and I think there was a lot of things going on, not just with me, but in life in general at that particular time. I have a trans son. He was in the process of coming out. So obviously for him, finding out his dad was gay as well probably didn't kind of help him have an easy time of doing that. I have to say my then wife was absolutely wonderful in that she was understanding when we went through talking about divorce, etc., separation. There was never a talk of using solicitors and things, and we were very capable and comfortable using it together because we still trusted each other, and we're still friends now. So that's a good thing. My daughter, again, 100% supportive. I met her. Her mum told her, obviously, rather than I telling her. And then we met and had a coffee, and her only thing was, I don't want any more lies. I just want to know what's going on in your life. And other than that, I think it's been entirely accepted, to be honest. There's still times when you feel that you have to come out again. And an example of that, even very recently, my son got married, and there were people at the wedding that I hadn't seen for a long time, and they were kind of like, "Oh, how come we lost touch?" and things like this, and why aren't you with your wife anymore? And it was like, well, I know I actually said, look, I can give you a rubbish story if you want me to, or I can tell you the truth. And I told them the truth, and it was absolutely fine. So for me personally, it was relatively painless. And I felt supported by my family and by my friends. And I was also really lucky that I had a couple of really close gay friends, one of whom I met on the very day that I joined the police. So we've been friends for 45, 46 years, whatever it is. Yeah. So I was very fortunate that I had those people around me to be supportive as well, from a slightly different perspective.
It's great you had that because so many people don't, and I feel like I was quite fortunate, and I think I've chose my friends well as well. So yes, I can't imagine what it's like for people who do have people who don't understand.
I think for me personally, when I was married, you think you're the only person in that position, and you kind of beat yourself up about it, and it's like, why am I like this? This isn't right. It's not normal. All the kind of things that are completely wrong, of course. But what I've discovered since is, of course, you're not the only one. There are hundreds and thousands of people in that position who are either going through it or have been through it, and it's not in every instance as easy as it was for me. In a lot of instances, it can be quite damaging for everybody concerned in it, whether it's the individual, the partner or ex-partner, the children, that it gets very messy and not very nice in some instances. But the important thing is you're never alone. You aren't the only person that is in that position. There are lots of people out there that are in that position. They're just not spoken necessarily about it at that moment in time.
That's exactly it. Yeah, this podcast is all about that. Really, just trying to let people know that you're not alone, and there are people who've been through it before, going through it, and there'll be plenty of people who are just sort of considering, do I go for it or not?
For me now, I look at younger people, and of course, for younger people nowadays, they can pretty much be what they want, do what they want, live how they want. Yet I'm still seeing younger people, when I say I'm making the same mistakes I made, my marriage and my children weren't a mistake, but doing the things that are going to lead them down a difficult path. And, one of the things that I think suffers the most is your own mental health and mental well-being, because you blame everything on yourself. You take everything on, you don't want to trouble anybody else. You don't want to cause upset. And yet I personally know at least one person that is now married, got 2 children, has really bad mental health problems, and actually it's down to the fact that he's gay and has got himself into this position. And he's done it to please other people, and that's the sad thing, as we probably all have done at some point.
Yeah, when I discovered about ADHD and that, which is all kind of new, but to me, but of course these are things weren't diagnosed back in the day. And then once you start unpicking everything, that's when you kind of get to the realization, well, actually, I don't have to worry what other people think, and people pleasing and all those kind of things.
Yeah, and I think you're right. And I think whilst you should, of course, care about other people, it's not your responsibility to manage what they think or how they perceive you. And I think I've spent enough years on this planet now to be of a view that, do you know what, this is it. There's a song and it says, I am what I am. And that is it, very much it now. And, I'm towards the back end of my lifespan, and I'm going to enjoy what's left of my life. And rather than worrying about what other people kind of think of me, perceive, how I am, if I want to go to a gay bar, watch a drag act, whatever, I'm going to go and do that, and I'm not going to apologise for that to anyone. And actually, the nice thing is, my daughter will come to a drag bar with me. My son will come to a drag bar with me. So I'm really, really lucky, and I know it's not the same for everybody.
That is brilliant. Yeah, you can do that as a family. Amazing. So,
and I think it's really important that my grandchildren also know that I'm gay. There's no secrets there. They're 13 and 11. They know that their uncle is also trans. It's healthy. It's not. There's nothing. Kids are resilient. They kind of just, right, okay, that's it, fine, and move on to the next topic. So I know I'm lucky in that respect. I know I'm supported, and I know it's not the same for everybody, but we also need to look after each other as well.
Yeah, no, it's really good for people to know that it's not doom and gloom on the other side, and actually the whole process of coming out is actually big in our heads, but when you do it, it's actually, to other people, it's just not as big a deal necessarily.
I'd like to think in times to come that there won't be such a thing as coming out. It'll just be, well, that's Fred and he likes blokes, kind of thing,
Yeah.
And that will just be life. And I've got a broad spectrum of friends of all ages, and one of my younger gay friends is very much of the view, well, why should I come out? It's no, his view is everybody knows I'm gay. Well, it's nothing. What have I got to demonstrate? And that would be I think that would be absolutely fabulous if we ever got to that stage. But I still think we're a little way away from that.
Yeah, I think as well, the whole owning it a bit and making a little bit of a thing about it is important, because it could start to go the other way again, where people are going to start worrying about, society starts getting more right wing, or whatever you call it. People are discriminating against it again, and all those amazing sort of barriers and things that have been broken down could all start being put up again.
And whilst I wouldn't want to get too deep into politics, I think it's really important that people stand up for themselves and stand up for their rights. And, we are seeing in various countries around the world a very strong shift towards the right.
Mm.
And I think you're entirely right. Why should we lose what not that we've necessarily fought for, but people before us fought for? There's a lot, even before my generation, there's a lot of people that stood up for what is right, and suffered effectively the consequences. And we definitely don't want to go back to where we were in the 50s, the 60s, and people just being herded up and rounded up just because they're gay.
Yeah, I can't imagine what that was like. I mean, it was bad enough growing up in the 70s and 80s, whatever,
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And I think well, I mean, one can only imagine, and I see things going on around the world, as probably most of people listening to this do. And it worries me, or it troubles me, not worries me, but it troubles me that there is that shift, and actually we are potentially perceived as an easy target because we're different, for no other reason, and that's the sole, this whole nonsense about drag queens shouldn't read stories to children. Do they think children actually see a drag queen? They just see someone dressed as a lady that's funny and reading them a story, and it's just madness.
Yeah, they're just whipping up just hatred and just trying to make things an issue when they're not.
Totally.
I might have mentioned to you, my mum, she does electrolysis, and so from the age of 7, I've seen people transitioning, having their beards taken away and stuff like that. And as a kid, it just didn't even occur to me that that was some people that happens to, and some people, and you just get on with life. One day they kind of walk out the door and they are like they're proper themselves, and it's just like
they are what and who they want to be.
Yeah.
And I think one of the saddest things I saw then, it really kind of struck home to me. And I think I'd gone with my son to one of his gender clinic appointments. And when you go to gender clinic appointments, they don't ask your name. They ask for your date of birth and your mobile phone number. And my son had gone in for his meeting. Myself and my ex-wife were sat waiting outside, and an elderly gentleman walked in, clearly a man at that point. And he was transitioning to become a female. And they asked his date of birth, and his date of birth was something like 1937. And it almost made me cry, because that's a person that's lived their life not being able to be who they want to be, and yet they've got to that age. Now they can, and it's probably going to be too late for them. That they're not going to get what they want. And it just made me realise that younger people are very, very lucky, because in the main they can be who they want to be. And so are we now, because we can be who we want to be. But it was just a little lesson that kind of stuck with me. And it was a 30-second thing, but I just suddenly had a bit of an intake of breath, and it was like, wow, that's A, it's brave, and B, it's sad, because that person has had to live as a man and clearly doesn't want to be a man. It just kind of stuck with me.
Yeah, I mean, it's similar to coming out later in life, but of course that's a little bit more extreme, I guess. But when I talk to people like yourself, and there's bits of regret, but then there's also that thing about when the time is right, you do it when you're ready. And so yeah, it's kind of better late than never kind of thing, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, yes, you're right about the regret bit, but you can't live your life regretting what went before, And as I said right at the outset, I don't regret. I can't possibly regret my children, my grandchildren. I don't actually regret that part of my life in any way, shape or form. What I do regret is not being brave enough to be able to stand up and say, actually, this is me. And, being pushed into things by society for doing something that wasn't what I wanted really deep down, and wasn't right for anybody, including my ex-wife, because as I say, she did nothing at all.
Yeah, I think it's when you know what it's like after having come out, and then you realise that it wasn't probably as big a deal as you'd made out in your head. That's probably the only bit. I never like to regret anything, because
No.
I'm so much stronger now, having been through various things in life, and and of course having kids and stuff is is wonderful. So that you're not going
And I think, lots of gay men would love to have children, for
to.
example, but naturally, and for various reasons, that hasn't happened. Certainly for older gay men, that perhaps wasn't possible. Um, and for that reason, I have to say I'm lucky. And we went as a family. It wasn't last year; it was the year before. There was myself, my daughter, my son-in-law, the two kids, my son and his partner, and we all went to Pride together. And as far as the kids were concerned, it was just a really happy, fun day out. The rest of it was kind of oblivious to them. So you can't regret that. It's just not possible.
Yeah, that's smashing. Sounds great. So, have you got any advice that you might want to sort of pass on to anyone who's thinking about coming out or going through that sort of turmoil at the moment? Is it worth it or not? That kind of thing, or might be married.
It's worth it. 100%. It's worth it. It's not necessarily going to be easy, and there are going to be bumps along the way. But I think it's find someone that you think you can trust, whether that's a gay person, a straight person, and sound them out. If you've been friends with someone for a long time, they're going to be your friend. You don't change just because you're gay. You don't change overnight. But I think probably most importantly, you are not alone. You're not the only person that's been through this, going through this. I think there's a lot of bad stuff about social media, but use social media. There's a lot of good stuff out there. There's a lot of groups that are supportive. Even I think when I started doing it, it was like, what? I don't know how to go about this. And I spoke to a group called Stonewall. Stonewall, I don't even know if they still exist, but they were really supportive. It was only a phone call, but kind of it starts to give you that bit of, right, I've got this and I can do it. The one thing I would say don't do is don't carry on living a lie, because you will regret it. And it's so much better for everybody when it's out in the open and you can be the person that you want to be. And you in most cases you won't lose touch with your children. There is always the odd occasion, but in most cases your children will understand, particularly if they're either very young because they're too young to understand, or that they're old enough to understand. And I would say don't make an enemy of your ex-partner, because if you badmouth your children's mum to them, you're forcing them to take sides, and actually try and avoid that if you can. And it's not necessarily easy. There are going to be things that are said and done that perhaps are hard to accept and to understand, but always try and be the bigger person if you can. And probably one for me, the most important, if you can possibly avoid involving lawyers, unless you absolutely have to, because the only person that ever makes anything out of it is the lawyer. I was really lucky. We sat down, we had a conversation, right, this is what I want to do, and this is what she wanted to do. And between the two of us, we got to the end goal. We signed an agreement that this is what we were going to do, and there was no kind of coming back. She wasn't going to come after my pension. I wasn't going to go after her pension. So if you can have that grown-up conversation, it's not easy, and it might mean you have to get lawyers involved, but it will make your life a lot easier. And it's one less thing you've got to stress about when you've probably got a lot of stress going on.
Yeah, I mean, that's a lesson for anyone, where doesn't matter what your sexuality,
Absolutely.
Really, especially
Absolutely.
for the children will be the ones who will lose out the most in a war between the parents. So, but obviously, I'm not saying you're at war, but if you fall out,
Yeah, no,
and
totally. I understand.
yeah,
And I think I was lucky that my kids were adult children. And my ex-wife never badmouthed about me to them, and I never did the same. And I think, it kept things on a fairly even keel after the initial kind of upset and tears, but it, we had we'd set a date that we were going to actually formally separate and everything, and we had about a year. And I kind of said to her, look, I won't do anything. I won't see anyone while I'm living in the same house as you. And we parted as amicably as we could in the circumstances. And, and I think if you can do that, and that's why it's not good to lie, because you're not just lying to yourself, you're hurting all the people around you as well. I think people need to understand that your sexuality is only a part of you. It doesn't define you. It doesn't make you, nor does it change you in the eyes of people. You don't suddenly change colour overnight or something. You are still you. It's just your sexual preference has changed, or outwardly has changed. Obviously, it's not necessarily changed inwardly. So I think it's recognising that it doesn't define you. It doesn't make you a person. It's part of making you a person. And I think most people will understand that and accept that. And if so long as you don't suddenly, if you've been kind of an average male person, for example, through your working life, and you suddenly go very camp, I think that's a bit more challenging for people to accept. But if you're just going to carry on being you, and all that's changed really is your sexual preferences, then outwardly, what's changed? Nothing. You're not. You've not become more flamboyant or more introvert. You're just carrying on doing your day job, as it were, being a dad or being whatever your job is. People don't really care. That they only care when you kind of lie to them to their faces, as it were. And actually, it's an opportunity for you to be entirely honest. So
that's it.
It's not a bad thing.
No, and you're sort of showing more, your full self and colouring in a little bit of that picture of possibly that, and unburdening yourself. That's the other thing, is the burden that you carry, you don't necessarily realise, but I feel so much lighter just having done that.
I think for me, I don't have to lie to people anymore, even though, because the day becomes a lie almost. You're talking about in a male culture, particularly in the police, for example, it might be what you did with your wife last night and things like that. And you don't have to lie anymore. You can be yourself, and you don't have to. People aren't going to say, oh, well, have you got a boyfriend? They're not going to ask those. Your close friends might, but you're not going to get those intrusive questions. And I think you're right. It is that I can finally be me. I'm not carrying around this stone on my back where I've got to keep constantly checking to make sure it's still in place. Almost as my armor, if you like. My armor's still there, but I don't need that armor anymore, because there's nothing. I don't need protecting.
No, I mean, one of my problems is I do, have that sort of what's right and wrong feeling,
Yes.
So if I hear someone saying something, you bite your lip until it gets to the point where I actually should say something, and that applies to whether someone's being rude or racist or whatever as well. So, but homophobia, if that occurs in the workplace, there's a point where you can put up with it, but I don't want to get myself in trouble either by getting the sack because I've ended up having an argument with colleagues.
But there is also, I think it's right. You should be able to stand up for yourself without that. You should, in theory, we should all be adults in the workplace. So we should be adult about how we deal with each other, and you don't have to be aggressive. But there's nothing wrong in saying, actually, I just wanted to say that kind of worried me a little bit, that comment that you made. Perhaps you wouldn't mind not doing that again. And most people will go, oh, sorry, I didn't realise. And that'll kind of be the end of the matter. You'll always get one, I suppose, that will insist on making it a big issue and a big deal. But whoever I work with, and whoever I come into contact with, and I've worked with people most of my working life, I've always had an ethos would treat them how I would want to be treated. And that should apply to your work colleagues, your family, your friends. That's common courtesy as I see it. But why would you want it? You go to work to earn a living. don't want to go to work and make your life more difficult.
I have to kind of learn to keep my mouth shut. I'm better at doing that now because
Yeah,
I don't want to start fighting other people's battles. And that could be someone having a go at a supermarket checkout person, just, you know, whatever it might be.
yeah, and I kind of a bit the same, because obviously having had a working life where I've, if you like, been enforcing rules and regulations,
Yeah.
I see things happening and it's like, and quite often my friends will say, well, no, we're going now because we're not getting involved in this because it isn't anything to do with you. But I guess it's just about knowing what's right and what's wrong, really, and not allowing that to impact on other people. I think, imagine if you were in a gay bar and somebody came in who didn't realise it was a gay bar and became extremely homophobic. I'd like to think that the majority of people in there would stand up and say, no, that's not acceptable, go. But you shouldn't not be able to stand up for yourself when what's right. But at the same time, obviously, sometimes discretion is a better part of valor.
Yes, I guess that's something that you very much know about.
Yeah.
When to walk away.
Know when to retreat. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. So I've had I haven't come across it too much, but I do find myself thinking, oh well, I'm in a position now where I probably should say something, and actually, you could play that card, and what's it got to do with you? You gay or whatever, and I say, well, bisexual, and
Yeah.
that very much is something that people go, oh. And then you can see it going in the head. They're going, "Oh God, what did I say?" And it's like, "Yeah, well, you've got to be careful whatever you say out loud."
You walk down the street every day, and you don't know what someone's sexuality is, what their sexual preferences are, and so it is. Why would you treat somebody different? You just treat people. It's always nice to be nice, I guess, is what I'm saying. Yeah. If you can,
yeah.
It doesn't cost anything, and I think karma's a good thing in some ways because it does come back and give it back. And I think after I came out, my friends introduced me to Gran Canaria. Now, if you haven't been to Gran Canaria, there's a place called Playa del Ingles where essentially it is a gay man's paradise. Really, it's by day it's a shopping centre, but by night there's lots of gay bars, drag bars, all kind of sort of things, music bars. And what I found in Gran Canaria was you could be whoever you wanted to be, whatever you wanted to be, and whatever interests you had, nobody actually cared. The one common bond everybody had, we were either gay, lesbian, bi, trans, etc. And it was nice because younger gay people didn't look down their nose at you because you were an older gay person. People didn't look at transgender people because they were trans. Nobody cared, and I guess it's a little utopia hidden away on a rock in the middle of the Atlantic. And it maybe if life could just be a little bit like that, then that would be a wonderful thing. But sadly, it's not like that.
Yeah, that's what we can hope for. That like one day, long after we're gone, that
absolutely,
everything's a little bit more utopian like that, and it shouldn't matter what other people are up to.
I guess the only other thing I would say is I see a lot of younger gay people, sometimes, not all obviously, but sometimes kind of look down their nose almost at older gay men. And life's very short, and I think people need to remember that you might be 20 now, but in the blink of an eye, you'll be 50 or 60 or whatever the age may be. And you will be that older gay person sat at a bar, perhaps on their own, just wanting someone to talk to them, perhaps. So, I think younger people can do a lot for somebody's self-esteem, just talk to people. I mean, I find most gay bars are like that people will just talk to you, whoever you are, and, about anything. But just sometimes you see that one that kind of sneers at you. It's like, oh, what are you doing in here type thing. But and I think, it's important to remember people, sadly, people died for the freedoms that we've all got, including the younger generation. And there's numerous examples of that out there where intentionally or otherwise people have been killed because of what their thoughts and beliefs are. So be nice to people. That's basically it.
Yeah, yeah. I was going to say about going out and meeting people and that, but that's definitely a thing to take on board because yeah, in my head, I'm still sort of in my 20s or whatever, or more, and then you
I think we
and
all
then
are.
and then you look in the mirror and you go, oh my God, I look like my old man, or I look like my granddad
Yeah,
or something.
totally. I think I'm 20 and then I've got to get out of bed. Then I realise I'm not.
Got to try and bend over and put your socks on or
Yeah,
whatever.
exactly that.
Brilliant. Well, I think we could probably start to sort of wrap up actually, but before we go, I just want to. You're going to talk about a few sort of gay cultural highlights, things, recommendations. What are you going to talk about in
Yeah, I
Chaps
mean,
Out Culture?
obviously, I think when I was thinking about coming out, obviously I was curious about things out there, and I found a few films that I thought were in some ways sad, but in other ways enlightening. One of them was Milk, and I don't know, a lot of people, because it was American, may not know who Harvey Milk was, but Harvey Milk was an American politician who very much stood for gay people and supported gay people. So that was one movie. Um, Another one was a film called Boy Erased, and that was about a young lad who realised he was gay, came out to his parents, who promptly sent him away for some conversion therapy. Things didn't quite go to plan. And probably, if nothing else, the saddest one was the Matthew Shepard story. Again, a young lad gone to university, got friends with a group of people who subsequently murdered him just because he was gay and for no other reason. And I think, that goes back to the point we were talking about a little bit earlier about we don't want to go back to where we were. This kind of occurred in the 90s-ish. I think there are certain movies out there that people should see, particularly and in this case, all three of those happen to be based on a true story. And in all three cases, the ending wasn't fantastic for the people concerned. So I'd point you in that direction, really.
No, they sound great. I've not seen those, but yeah, you'll be talking about those in Chaps Out Culture, and very important to gem up on that sort of gay history that people don't necessarily know about, and the challenges that people have gone through.
I was quite fortunate that a few years back, me and my friends went and did a little American road trip, and one of it we was in New York, and we actually went to Stonewall Bar, and although it's very commercialised now, it was very important because we saw a lot of history, and the kind of where our rights grew up in a way, because that's how it all kind of started, Yes, it started as a riot, or it actually started as a police raid, but if the people involved in that hadn't stood up for their rights, we probably wouldn't be where we are today.
That's brilliant. Well, thank you so much for coming on, and really appreciate your sharing your story with us.
You're welcome.
And everything you've got to say. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of Chaps Out, and a huge thank you to Dave for being so generous in sharing his story with such honesty and compassion. Dave spoke powerfully about growing up in a time when coming out as gay simply wasn't an easy option, and about the decades he spent living the life he felt he was expected to live. When he finally came out at 55, he described the profound sense of relief it brought, saying, "I can finally be me. I'm not carrying around this stone on my back anymore." Dave was also clear that coming out later in life isn't without its challenges, reminding us that it's not necessarily going to be easy. There are going to be bumps along the way, but it's worth it. He emphasised that sexuality is only one part of who we are, saying, "Your sexuality doesn't define you. It's just a part of making you a person." And now, with a new perspective on life, Dave shared how he's choosing to move forward. "I'm going to enjoy what's left of my life. I'm not going to apologise for that to anyone." If you're feeling confused and looking for advice, I hope Dave's words reassured you that you are not alone, and that it really is never too late to live honestly as your true self. And please subscribe to Chaps Out wherever you listen so you never miss an episode, along with episodes of our companion podcast, Chaps Out Culture. You can also follow us on TikTok and Instagram. If you like what we're doing, you can donate via the link in the bio. Your support helps with running costs and keeps these conversations flowing. And finally, if you're a man who grew up in the UK and came out as bisexual or gay later in life and have an inspiring story you'd be willing to share, please email chapsoutpod@gmail.com. Thanks again for listening and take care.